She was exactly 30 seconds late. Just enough to miss the bus, just enough to be angry, just enough to still be alive. She didn't know it yet, but those 30 seconds were the difference between going home and never getting there at all. It was a Thursday. Nothing special about it. No birthday, no anniversary, no reason to remember it at all. Just a grey, forgettable Thursday in November. The kind where the sky gets dark too early and the cold sneaks through your coat before you're ready for it. Lena had stayed late at work. Again. She worked at a mid-size insurance firm on the 11th floor of a building that always smelled faintly of printer ink and burnt coffee. She was a data analyst, good at her job, quiet about it, the kind of person who got things done without needing applause. That night, she'd been untangling a spreadsheet error someone else had made. A simple mistake, a transposed number. But it had cascaded through 3 reports, and her manager had asked her, not officially, just with that look, to fix it before end of day. So she stayed. She didn't complain, that wasn't really her style. She put on her headphones, worked through it methodically, and by 7:40 p.m. it was done. Clean, corrected. She saved the file, sent a quick email to her manager, who had of course already gone home, and started gathering her things. Her coat, her tote bag, her water bottle she kept forgetting to actually drink from. She checked the time on her phone. 7:42 p.m. Her bus left at 7:50. She exhaled slowly. 8 minutes. The stop was about a 6-minute walk in normal conditions, but she was on the 11th floor. She still had to get down, get through the lobby, get outside, and then make it to the corner of Western and 5th without stopping. It was doable. Barely. But Lena was used to barely. She grabbed her bag, shut off her desk lamp, and walked toward the elevator. The hallway was already quiet. Most of her co-workers had cleared out hours ago. The cleaning crew was working at the far end. Someone had left a half-eaten birthday cake on the break room counter, the kind with white frosting and 2 sweet roses. She passed it without stopping. She had a bus to catch. She had taken this bus hundreds of times before. Tonight would be the last time she ever tried to catch it. The elevator was slow. That particular elevator, the one on the left side of the lobby bank, the one closest to her floor, had always been slow. Everyone in the building knew it. It had a reputation. People joked about it at the coffee machine, but the other 2 elevators were already on lower floors, and Lena didn't have time to wait. She pressed the button, waited, pressed it again, like that ever helped. The little light above the door blinked. 8, 7, 6. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looked at her phone. 7:43. 5 minutes left, and she hadn't even left the building. The elevator finally arrived with a soft chime that felt almost apologetic. She stepped in, pressed L for lobby, and watched the doors close with agonizing slowness. The ride down felt longer than usual. She wasn't sure if it actually was, or if time just worked differently when you were trying to outrun it. Lobby. The doors opened. She moved fast, through the turnstile, waving her badge at the sensor without slowing down, past the security desk, where Marcus, the night guard she'd exchanged 100 casual waves with, called out, "Night, Lena!" "Night!" she called back without turning. Through the revolving door and out into the cold, the air hit her immediately, sharp and damp, the way November air feels in a city at night, like it has a personality, and that personality is indifferent to you. She walked fast, then faster. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk in an uneven rhythm. She wasn't a runner, never had been, but she moved with purpose, weaving around a couple walking slowly, stepping off the curb to go around a food cart that had set up at the corner. At the intersection of Western and 4th, the light turned red, just as she arrived. She stopped, looked both ways. The street was mostly clear, a single cab rolling slowly in the far lane. She went. She never did that, crossed against the light. It was a small thing, a rule she'd kept almost unconsciously since childhood, since her mother had grabbed her hand at a crosswalk once and said, "We wait, Lena, we always wait." But tonight, she went. She told herself it was fine. The street was practically empty. She could see she made it across without incident, but the crossing added maybe 4 seconds. And the detour around the food cart had added maybe 5 more. She didn't count them then. She would later. One tiny decision had already changed her timing. She just didn't know it yet. She was halfway down the block, almost to the bus stop, when her phone buzzed. It vibrated once in her coat pocket. The kind of single buzz that usually meant a text. She almost ignored it. Her hand actually reached into her pocket and felt the phone and almost pulled it back out empty, the way you do when you're mid-thought and don't want to break the rhythm. But something made her stop. She slowed down just slightly, pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Her sister, Dana. "Did you talk to Mom today?" Lena almost laughed. Of course, it was a long-running thing between them. Who had called their mother most recently? Who was falling behind? Whose turn it was to be the good one? Dana lived closer to their parents, but she worked less flexible hours, and somehow that had evolved into Lena being expected to call more often. It was a mild, affectionate guilt trip that had been going on for years. She rolled her eyes in the way you can only do at family. She kept walking, but slower now, thumbs moving over the screen. "I will later." She pressed send. Then, because she was still holding the phone and her feet had slowed, she paused, just for a moment, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, to glance at the screen in case Dana replied immediately. She didn't. Lena pocketed the phone and started moving again. Those 7 seconds, 5 to type, 2 to wait, felt like nothing at the time. They were the kind of seconds that disappear without leaving a trace. The kind you could never recall afterward if someone asked you what you did with them. But they were gone. She had been 30 seconds from making it. Now she had maybe 23. She picked up her pace. That message would become the most important delay of her life. She saw the bus. It was still at the stop, but just barely. The doors were in the process of closing. The accordion fold of the rear door was already halfway shut. The hydraulic hiss of the mechanism had already started. She was 30 feet away. She waved, arm up, bag swinging. The driver didn't see her, or if he did, he'd already committed to leaving. The door finished closing. The bus's hazard lights blinked off. "Hey," she said, but not loud enough. Barely a word. The bus pulled away from the curb in a long, slow arc, its red taillights disappearing into the traffic stream, heading down Western. She stood there. For a moment, she just stood there on the sidewalk, arms slowly lowering back to her side, watching the back of the bus get smaller and smaller until it merged with the other red lights in the distance. The cold air felt colder now. Or maybe she was just noticing it. "Great," she muttered. She said it the way you say things to nobody in particular, when you need to put the feeling somewhere outside yourself. A word like a punctuation mark at the end of a bad sentence. She lowered her bag off her shoulder and let it rest by her feet. She stood under the orange glow of the bus shelter light, next to a man in a wool hat, reading something on a folded-up newspaper, an actual paper newspaper, which struck her as oddly quaint, and a teenager with earbuds in, foot-tapping. She pulled out her phone and checked the schedule. The next bus on this route, 8:12 p.m., 22 minutes. She exhaled. 22 minutes, standing in the cold, after an already long day. All because of a slow elevator and a text message and a red light she'd actually stopped herself from crossing, and then one she hadn't. She thought about calling a rideshare, calculated the cost, looked at the app, surge pricing. Of course, she put the phone back in her pocket. She'd wait. If she had arrived 30 seconds earlier, she would have been sitting in seat 14A, the next 20 minutes stretched. That's the thing about waiting when you don't want to be waiting. Time doesn't pass evenly. It bunches up, slows down. You check your phone and it says 7:54, and you feel certain at least 10 minutes have gone by since 7:52. Lena leaned against the glass panel of the bus shelter and scrolled without really reading. A few people drifted in and out of the stop, a woman with grocery bags who caught the crosstown, a couple of college-age kids who checked the schedule and then walked on, apparently deciding something else was faster. The street had the particular energy of a city in early evening, not the rush of peak hour, not the quiet of late night, just the hum. Cars, distant music from somewhere, the clatter of a delivery bike. A car sped past, too fast for the zone, the kind of driver who treats yellow lights as a countdown to accelerate. Then another. Lena watched them go without much feeling. Then, a sound. Distant at first, the way sounds arrive when you're not listening for them, more of a texture in the background than an actual noise. Sirens. She registered them passively the way city people register sirens, as background, as someone else's emergency, as the constant ambient reminder that the world is always, somewhere, in a state of urgency. But they got louder, and then louder still, not passing, the way sirens usually do, rising and then fading as the vehicle moves through. These were rising and staying, multiple sirens now, different tones layering on top of each other. The higher pitch of an ambulance, the lower pulse of what might be a fire truck. Lena straightened slightly. The man with the newspaper glanced up. The teenager with earbuds pulled one out. She didn't know those sirens were meant for her bus. People started murmuring. It began with the newspaper man, who had pulled out his own phone and was frowning at it. Then the teenager, whose expression shifted from bored to alert in the way of someone who'd suddenly seen something online that matched what was happening in real life. "Oh my God," the teenager said, out loud, to nobody. Lena turned. What happened? The teenager held up their phone, a Twitter thread, or maybe a local news app, Lena couldn't quite tell, showing a photo taken from a distance, blurry, lights flashing. "The 7:50 bus," the teenager said. "There was an accident. 2 streets down." The words landed slowly. Lena's mind did what minds sometimes do in moments of incoming shock. It pushed back. It reframed. It looked for the version of events that meant she didn't have to feel what she was about to feel. Maybe it's a different route, she thought. The 750 on Western isn't the only 750 in the city. "What route?" she asked. "The 14, down Western." Her chest tightened. "That's my bus." She said it quietly, almost to herself. The newspaper man heard anyway and glanced at her with a complicated expression. Sympathy and discomfort mixed together, the look of someone who doesn't know what to do with someone else's near miss. More details were arriving on the teenager's phone, piece by piece, the way breaking news always comes, partial, incomplete, alarming in its gaps. A truck, a red light, impact on the left side of the bus. Lena's hand went to her mouth without her deciding to put it there. Seat 14A was right by the window, on the left side. Details came slowly. That's always how it is. The first wave of news is just shape and shadow. Something happened. Here is approximately where, here is approximately how bad. The specifics fill in over minutes and hours, sometimes days, and by then you've already built a picture in your head that may or may not match the truth. What Lena knew, standing at the bus stop on the corner of Western and 5th at 8:03 p.m. on a Thursday in November, a delivery truck had run a red light 2 blocks down. The bus, the 750, Route 14, her bus, had been crossing through the intersection on a green signal when the truck hit it. The truck had struck the left side of the bus. Passengers were injured. The count was still coming in, at least several, possibly more. The left side of the bus. Lena had a thing about buses. She always sat on the same side, in the same general area. It wasn't an obsession, just a preference, the kind of small habit that builds up over time without you ever consciously deciding on it. She liked the left side because the view was better on her route home. She could see the river for 3 blocks if she sat on the left, about 1/3 of the way back. Seat 14A. She couldn't move. It wasn't a dramatic freeze. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't on the ground. She was standing perfectly still with her bag at her feet and her phone in her hand and the cold air around her. And she was doing math. The elevator. She'd complained about it being slow. How many seconds had that cost her? The red light she'd crossed. Actually, she'd done that, but then the detour around the food cart had cost her something. And stopping to look at her phone after texting Dana. 7 seconds for the text. Maybe 3 or 4 for the food cart. The elevator probably cost her another 10, maybe 15. And just the aggregate, the rubber meeting the road, the final calculation, added up to exactly the difference between catching the bus and watching it leave. She hadn't made it by 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, a truck somewhere in the city had been setting in motion all the physics that would eventually intersect with that bus, at that corner, at that exact moment. The universe, or whatever you want to call the thing that arranges such things, had been running both timelines simultaneously. And she had been bumped from one to the other by an elevator, a text message, a food cart, and a habit about red lights she'd broken just enough to cross one street early and not the one that mattered. Her knees felt hollow. That's the only way she could describe it later. Not weak, not shaky, hollow, like the structural part of her had been temporarily removed, and she was standing on the idea of knees rather than the actual bones. Every second she had complained about had protected her. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. Dana. Her sister was calling now, not texting, a real call. Lena stared at it for one full ring, then answered. Hey. Her own voice surprised her. It sounded thin, like audio of herself from far away. Hey, did you see the news about the bus on Western? Dana's voice was tight, she'd already heard. I was supposed to be on it. Silence. Not the silence of a dropped call or a bad connection. The silence of a person processing something that doesn't process quickly. The silence of someone recalibrating. What? Dana said finally, barely above a whisper. The 7:50, I missed it. I was 30 seconds late. Another silence. Lena heard her sister exhale, long, slow, the kind of breath that carries something with it. Relief, fear, the complicated mixture of emotions that comes from being the person on the other end of this news. I almost didn't answer your text, Lena said. I was running and I almost just kept going. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Not a full break, just a hairline fracture in the composure she was still maintaining out of some habitual instinct to hold herself together in public. Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Lena would turn over in her mind for a long time afterward. I had a feeling I should message you. Not, I was checking in. Not, I texted everyone tonight. I had a feeling. Dana wasn't a particularly mystical person. She was a kindergarten teacher who drove a sensible sedan and made her grocery lists in alphabetical order by category. She wasn't the type to talk about feelings and premonitions and the strange tides of intuition. But she said it simply and directly, the way you say something true. I had a feeling I should message you. Lena stood there under the bus shelter light with the cold air on her face and the distant sound of sirens still faintly audible and her sister's voice in her ear. And she didn't know what to say to that. There wasn't really anything to say to that. Sometimes we call it coincidence. Sometimes it's something else. She took a rideshare home. She didn't want to wait for the next bus. She didn't want to think about buses at all. The driver had the radio on, news. She asked him to change it, and he switched to something soft, instrumental, without asking why. Some people have good instincts like that. She got home to her apartment just before 9. It was a one-bedroom on the fourth floor of a building she'd lived in for 3 years. She knew it well, every creak of the floor, every hiss of the radiator, the way the kitchen light flickered sometimes when you first turned it on. She took off her coat, sat on the couch without turning on any other lights, just sat. She didn't text anyone, she didn't call her parents. She'd let Dana handle that, or maybe she just couldn't do it yet. She didn't look at the news coverage of the accident, even though her phone kept wanting to show it to her. She just sat. Eventually she got up and made tea, not because she wanted tea, but because doing something with her hands helped. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the street 4 floors below, holding the mug, people walking dogs, a couple arguing quietly at the corner, a kid on a bike with lights blinking, all of it ordinary, all of it miraculous. She went to bed eventually, though she didn't sleep much. Her mind kept replaying, not the accident because she hadn't seen it, but the sequence, the chain, the invisible string of small events that had pulled her away from where she was supposed to be. The morning came the way mornings do, indifferent, light leaking through the blinds, the world already moving before she was ready for it. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city starting up. Then she sat up and looked at the clock. 7:50 a.m., exactly 12 hours later. She stared at those numbers for a long moment. 7:50. 12 hours ago, a bus she had been running to catch had been hit by a truck at an intersection. 12 hours ago, she had been standing at a bus stop, watching the taillights disappear and feeling annoyed at the world for making her late. 12 hours ago, she had been 30 seconds from a different life. Or no life at all. She cried. Not from fear. The fear had passed, or at least settled into a lower register, something she'd feel for weeks in the background. But not like this. She cried from something harder to name, from the weight of understanding, from the strange mercy of it, from the fact that a slow elevator and a thoughtless text and an old habit about red lights had conspired, entirely without her knowledge or consent, to keep her here, in this apartment, on this morning, looking at this clock, alive. She would never complain about being late again. Some days don't feel important. They start like all the others, alarm, coffee, the same route, the same routines. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with warnings or previews or any indication that this one will be different from the 1,000 that came before. And sometimes they aren't different. Not in any way you ever find out about. But sometimes they are. And the only evidence is a detail you almost missed. A delay you resented. A pause that felt like wasted time. Lena thought about that a lot in the weeks that followed. She thought about the elevator, the one she'd pressed twice, the one she'd quietly cursed under her breath. She thought about the food cart at the corner that had made her step off the curb. She thought about Dana's text and the 7 seconds she'd spent replying to it while still half walking, half running, convinced those seconds were costing her something. They were. They were costing her the bus, which was giving her everything else. She didn't become a different person after that Thursday. She didn't quit her job or move to a cabin somewhere or start making dramatic speeches about the fragility of life. That's not how it works, really. Not for most people. You carry the experience and it changes the temperature of ordinary moments, the way sunlight changes when it comes through tinted glass. Still the same light, just different. She stopped complaining about slow elevators. She started answering her sister's texts without rolling her eyes first. She bought a coffee from the cart at the corner of Western and 4th one morning, the one she'd detoured around, and the man who ran it recognized her from that night and asked if she was okay. She said yes, she meant it. Because here is the thing about delays, about interruptions, about the small annoyances that scatter through an ordinary day like gravel on a path. We experience them as obstacles. We experience them as friction between us and where we're trying to go, We don't know, we can't know, that sometimes the obstacle is the destination, that the interruption is not keeping us from the story, but is the story, that the detour is the route. Some delays are just delays, but some of them are something else entirely. Some of them are protection wearing a disguise, and sometimes the day that changed everything started with being 30 seconds late.